Welcome, everybody, into Redacted on this Monday. So glad to see you here. And it is a very busy day as we look at what the United States is planning to do against Cuba. And, of course, it seems like a false flag operation in full effect as this invasion seems imminent. We're also going to look at Iran and whether or not President Trump, it seems like he just put a pause on any renewed attacks on Iran. But how long will that pause last? And what will this mean for the future conflict? We're going to unpack all of that today.
I love the rhetoric. It's like, I'm going to bomb the shit out of Iran. Oh, actually, so-and-so asked me not to. But yes, I'm going to. But then we're asking you to not start a war with Iran. Does that matter at all?
No, Americans, it doesn't matter. But Middle East countries that have asked him, hey, can you actually, because the UAE could literally be wiped off the map if this renewed attacks happen on the part of the United States, because Iran would attack desalination plants, energy infrastructure, everything. So perhaps these Middle East countries are on the phone saying, can you not do this?
I'm just wondering, where do we come in here? We're just the slaves. We're just the taxpayers.
And I've seen a lot of people on X saying that it's tied to like market manipulation. Like he's manipulating the markets.
Well, you see that with Palantir, him like pushing this, Palantir, and then people are inside buying up as much as they can, oil manipulation, etc. All of that. Ed Galrain, by the way, who's Massey's opponent down in Kentucky, just gave a speech this afternoon and basically was like, yeah, we need to go back. We need to attack Iran. Like, we need to rally Americans around attacking Iran. So...
Well, we're going to look at the vital signs of the economy. They are not good, you guys. If you went into your doctor and got these vital signs, they would say, you're dying. So that is exactly what we're going to look at in terms of the U.S. economy, because your dollar is worth less while you have to go to work to pay for these wars. So all of that and more. Before we do that, though, we want to tell you about our friends over at Angel Studio because, Memorial Day, it's supposed to mean something. It's about honoring sacrifice, remembering the people who gave everything so this country could exist and our families could live freely. That's part of why we appreciate what Angel Studio is doing right now. They are one of the very few platforms putting out stories rooted in courage, faith, resilience, and American values instead of tearing things down. There are some great films on there right now. Something to Stand For with Mike Rowe, Indivisible, Green and Gold, Homestead, The Last Rodeo. These are stories about sacrifice, perseverance, family, what's actually worth fighting for. Right now, they're running a huge Memorial Day sale where you can get a big discount off of your membership, making this the perfect time to join. And if you go premium, you get 2 free tickets to every theatrical release, including Young Washington coming July 3rd for America's 250th birthday. So if you want entertainment that actually reflects what Memorial Day is about, go to angel.com/redacted and join today. One more time, that's angel.com/redacted.
Well, according to the Mockingbird media, Cuba is preparing to attack the United States with special attack drones that they've gotten from Iran and Russia. Watch.
Reports of a potential threat to our nation from Cuba. Axios is reporting the communist island nation is buying attack drones from Russia and Iran. So far, some 300 drones. And the communist government of Cuba recently began discussing plans to potentially use those drones to attack U.S. targets, including Guantanamo Bay and possibly Key West, Florida. Here's retired Navy SEAL Mike Sorrell.
So there it is. There's the false flag narrative being rolled out, and it's really like a remember the Maine moment. This report all traces back to an Axios report citing anonymous U.S. officials, exclusive U.S. eyes attack drone threat from Cuba, saying that classified intelligence says that Cuba has acquired 300 military drones from Russia and Iran, and that Cuban military officials have discussed possible attacks on Guantanamo Bay and key naval assets, Key West, Florida. Okay, but also buried inside this report is there's an admission from U.S. officials that they do not believe that Cuba is a threat, and they do not believe that Cuba is actively planning to attack America. But of course, bury that deep in your report. Meanwhile, Cuba now openly saying, beware of false flags. The U.S. is creating a fraudulent case for war. So is this Operation Northwoods all over again? Colonel Douglas McGregor is here to talk about this. We're also going to have him on to talk about what's going on with Iran a little bit later after the break. Colonel, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Good to see you as well.
So I ask, is this like Operation Northwoods all over again? Maybe not in as large of an operation. 1962, later declassified. The Central Intelligence Agency was going to stage and commit acts of terrorism against the United States, specifically against civilian targets, in order to blame the Cuban government in order to get us into a war against Cuba. Do you see any similarities here?
You and Natalie know that if we applied any sort of rational calculus to try and determine what our national strategic interests are, let alone our national security interests, we would not now be at war with Iran. So I don't think reality in terms of our national security interest is really in play here, Clayton. This is the usual run-up that we saw with the Bush administration before we went into Iraq, about the imminent mushroom cloud that Condoleezza Rice talked about. It's all part of the same routine. And I don't know that any Americans are really paying much attention to it, except, of course, I think the Cuban lobby and the very wealthy Cubans living in the United States who contributed handsomely to President Trump's campaign. They are certainly paying attention. And I think we got to go back and remember something about President Trump. When it comes to transactional behavior, he keeps his promises. And it was very clear from the moment he was elected that he was very transactional. You want something, you pay for it. You contribute enough, you get it. We've seen that with AIPAC and the rich Zionist billionaires, and now we're seeing it again with the Cuban crowd.
Are they as powerful as all of that to order up a war that they want?
Well, I think you've got to take into account that the Secretary of State, who is also the National Security Advisor, swings an enormous axe. Don't underestimate the power and influence of Marco Rubio. This is, with him, I think, practically a lifelong dream. His hatred for the Castro regime is probably beyond estimation. So he is absolutely determined to do this. And there are also other interested parties. No doubt President Trump and many of the billionaires that are close friends of his, we don't need to name them, but we know who they are. They're very much in line with the war against Russia, the war against Iran. They're probably looking at Cuba from a different angle. Wouldn't it be nice if they could get back into Cuba and reinvigorate what we used to call the leisure activity sector? In other words, gambling and all the usual criminality that goes with gambling. Las Vegas has been on the decline for a long time. Las Vegas lost a lot of money when it became family friendly. So they're really looking at something else right now in Cuba as well. And I think President Trump would love to build a tower there in Havana named after him, and at least one or two golf courses.
Yeah, I mean, talk about some of the most. I mean, I've talked to investors for years about this who've said they're just waiting, salivating for when this would happen, when all that beachfront property would be available in Cuba, close to the United States, perfect for vacations. And Cubans right now, according to reports, are preparing for this invasion. And Cuban leaders saying that this would be an absolute bloodbath if the United States does that. Maybe you can unpack the military side of this. What that would look like? Is this like Venezuela 2.0?
It's closer to Venezuela than it is to any bloodbath. I wouldn't expect that. I think they could easily muscle their way into Cuba. Most of the people that would otherwise stand in their way will get out of the way. They'll find an exit door and go. So I don't think that's the issue. But I think we ought to consider the history down there. We actually went into Cuba more frequently during the 20th century than we did in any other country. We invaded the place 3 times. And 3 different times we established new governments. 3 different times we occupied it, at least temporarily. We established a base at Guantanamo, as we all know. We stayed in Puerto Rico, which we acquired during the Spanish-American War, the same time we went into Cuba for the first time. And each time we had a hand in rewriting the Constitution. In fact, the last time we went in there, we actually wrote the Constitution, and we supervised elections. So at this point, Cuba is obviously an example of our influence. It's a perfect liberal democracy. Oh, well, I guess it isn't. So it didn't.
Well, the trump card here, I guess we need to use a different expression. The unknown here is China, because China is aligned with Cuba and continues to condemn what the United States is doing, which is crippling sanctions to the point where in Cuba they have rolling blackouts now. So I wonder how Harris Faulkner at Fox News thinks they're going to charge those drones that will be aimed at us.
They can't even keep the power on.
Yeah, there's no power. So I'm curious about that. But yeah, I'm curious about the Chinese piece as well.
Well, first of all, the Chinese and the Russians, for that matter, neither of them are particularly stupid. Unlike us, they would never attack a country 6,000 or 7,000 miles away and commit military power that they have to sustain over that great distance. It's going to be very hard to keep afloat and keep alive. And they also don't want a war with us. And if they were to become involved there directly, they'd reckon that we would probably attack them. And they're probably right. Only we are dumb enough to go halfway around the world, start a war that costs billions and billions of dollars. It's almost impossible to sustain, and it isn't going to be winnable. So I wouldn't expect that. I think what we're really seeing is closer to what Clayton said. This is a kind of Venezuela too. I think lots of the people down there are resigned to whatever happens. Will they put up any fight at all? I'm sure they do something. But I think the whole idea about the drones that are being readied for use against us, while that's certainly a possibility if we attack, I don't see them precipitating an attack by doing that. I think we ought to be far more concerned about the drug cartels, their operations, their equipment, their capabilities, their technology in Mexico. But for some reason, that seems to have slipped out of the radar.
And Mexico sending thousands of pounds of aid to Cuba as we speak. Claudia Scheinbaum down there reiterating that again today. So, Colonel, I guess before we take a quick break here, do you think that there's an attack imminent against or some sort of invasion of Venezuela 2.0 against Cuba in the coming days and weeks?
Well, you say weeks, I guess that's a possibility. No doubt Secretary Rubio wants to do that. So I wouldn't exclude that as a possibility. But right now, we have most of our capability, certainly in the Air Force and the Navy, committed against Iran. And I think they're probably going to try and do what they think will terminate the war with Iran first before they step into the Cuban mess. But I could be wrong.
Well, stay right there. We want to talk about Iran and those movements that have unfolded over the last few hours here, hearing from the president, hearing from Middle East partners as well. We're going to unpack the latest there. 79 days as the Strait of Hormuz is now closed. So, Colonel will be back with us here in a second. So we'll talk about that. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at American Financing, at Ethos. And let me get my spectacles on here. Because our...
No, it is American Financing.
Sorry, you were right. You were right. I was wrong.
Oh, okay, good.
I was wrong.
Let me get my notes up here. And summertime expenses in 2026 are stacking up faster than ever, from those pricey family vacations and record gas prices to looming tuition and camp fees. For many of us, it feels like the only option right now is swiping the credit card. In fact, we have a new Gallup poll we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. How many Americans right now are just trapped in this debt cycle? High interest debt, just paying for like basic things like gas, food for their family, healthcare. They're not going out and buying boats. They're just buying basic necessities right now. So at American Financing, they specialize in building plans tailored specifically to your goals, so they can take a look at your current debt and show you exactly how your home's equity can work smarter for you. So if you do own a home, imagine rolling that high interest debt into one simple, manageable monthly payment. There are no upfront fees, zero pressure, just honest advice from salary-based consultants. And this is the important point, salary-based consultants. So they're not working for the big banks, they're actually working for you. On average, their customers are saving $800 a month. That's real breathing room. Start today and maybe even able to delay 2 mortgage payments. American Financing, that's Americans' home for home loans. Call them 866-890-8434 today. That's 866-890-8434 today. Or just visit AmericanFinancing.net/redacted. Well, today is day 79 of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and the world's oil stockpiles are depleting quickly, very fast, with only weeks of supplies left, according to the head of the IEA, the International Energy Agency. And President Trump is running out of patience. If you could read this from his Truth Social post, he sent another round of messages to Iran that the clock is ticking. He said, if Iran surrenders, admits their navy is gone, resting at the bottom of the sea, their air force is no longer with us, if the entire military walks out of Tehran, drops their weapons, hands held high, shouting, I surrender, while wildly waving the representative white flag, and if their entire remaining leadership signs all necessary documents of surrender, then that's, I guess, where we'll be.
So
that's when we'll stop letting them block us.
We'll let them stop blocking us. Yeah. Colonel Douglas Macgregor has been watching this very, very closely and the moves over the past few hours. And Colonel, we just hear, Middle East partners, I guess, also just within the last hour or so asking President Trump, please stop this madness. I assume that Iran would then begin to target and hit the UAE and other energy infrastructure, desalinization operations inside of the UAE, Bahrain, God knows what else. Is that the pressure being applied to President Trump right now?
That presumes that he feels pressure, and I'm not sure he does. Whenever he's been questioned about the economic implications, the financial crises and so forth, he waves it off as though, no, this doesn't matter. And whatever pain the American people are suffering, it'll be short term. I think we've heard that sort of thing before. It didn't turn out to be that way. But nevertheless, that's his position. So I think right now, if you look objectively at all the indications or indicators of military action, what we've got out there in terms of air and naval power, and even now substantial light forces, light ground forces, I would say that the renewed war is a certainty. I would expect it to happen anytime.
A certainty.
I mean, what he's saying now within the last hour is it was going to be tomorrow. Gulf leaders have asked me to hold off because talks are positive. But again, he's reiterating no nuclear weapons or nuclear of any kind for Iran. But was going to be tomorrow. We're just going to push that off. But it's clear. I mean, it's clear something is coming, right?
I think we're going to go back into the same war we were in before. I think he's going to go in probably with more force than he did previously. I'm sure that's what the general officers are promising him and the admirals are telling him. And, what was the definition of insanity that Einstein used to offer?
Doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Yeah, and I think that's where we are. Now, the other thing that nobody's considering is the possibility that Iran, whose forces are now resupplied, replenished, and so forth, may reveal some new capabilities we haven't encountered yet. That's a possibility. We don't exactly know with great precision everything that the Russians and the Chinese have provided to them. And we do admit privately that we grossly underestimated the engineering skills of the Iranians. So this could turn out to be a lot worse on both sides than it was the last time. I think that's very much a certainty.
And I'm just curious about the Middle East partnership of all of this, and on the United States side, but more specifically on the attacks that would come from Iran. The idea that Iran would, frankly, devastate the UAE, really wipe Dubai off the map for all intents and purposes, hitting, again, energy infrastructure, desalinization. Like, the list is pretty extensive, what they would hit, rendering that country basically useless. Does President Trump seem to care about that?
Well, as I said before, I think that's a tertiary concern as far as he's concerned. And I think in private, the leadership of the UAE is probably cheering him on, despite what you just described as a likely outcome. Let me explain that. I think people need to understand that the UAE is very much a Trojan horse for Israeli and American power and influence. And it has been a thorn in the side of Iran for a very long time. If you're an Iranian, you very much welcome the opportunity to annihilate this platform for the projection of power against you. So the UAE will definitely be struck, and most of it will be flattened or destroyed. Now, I don't know where all the money goes. It's probably sitting in New York City, London, other places. But you're right. The majority of the population, I think we had at the beginning of the war, an estimated 67 million people living from Iraq's border on the west coast of the Persian Gulf all the way down to Oman. I don't think there's half of that left at this point. And I think more will leave. They'll bundle up in their automobiles or SUVs. They'll drive across the desert to Riyadh. And from Riyadh, you can get an aircraft flight to various places. So I think that's inevitable. And I think President Trump has really played the media for suckers. How many times has he manipulated the stock market and investors? And most investors really believe that one of two things is going to happen. Either Trump tacos, as they like to say, chickens out, leaves, or Trump doubles down and crushes Iran. I mean, when you talk to people, they say, oh, well, the Marines and the Navy, they'll seize the strait, they'll march in, they'll take all this over. This won't last much longer. They have no idea what the topography is like. They don't understand what they're dealing with. They don't understand the climate, the conditions. They absolutely have no idea what kind of capabilities we're up against, particularly in air and missile defense. So at this stage, I'd say yes, we're going to see the war restart. It'll probably last as long as the last phase did. And I see no evidence that the Iranians are going to do anything remotely along the lines of what President Trump expects or would like.
What happens to Israel in this?
Well, if you're an Israeli right now, your view is, for the moment, you have control of the United States Armed Forces and its government. You know, this is a unique point in the history of the Israeli state. They have, for many decades, tried very hard to gain control in terms of voting power on the Hill, enough people to guarantee the flow of aid and support to Israel. Well, you know, that was relatively unchallenging. But what they know now is that this war has had a distinctly negative impact on public opinion in the United States regarding Israel. Now, public opinion hasn't mattered a great deal. You know, we've gone to war before, whether or not the American people were consulted or wanted it. And this is a perfect example of doing that yet again. This time, Congress didn't even receive a note in the mail. It was Congress stood up and gave the obligatory standing ovation when the State of the Union was given, and Israel and Iran were mentioned. So, you know, at this point, everybody's on board. This is Tucker Carlson's ship of fools, full steam ahead. And the American people aren't with it, but it doesn't matter.
I want to ask you about whether or not the military is with it, because the morale of the military, especially the soldiers who were stranded above the USS Gerald Ford, which just did return to Virginia over the weekend. But I believe it was a 326-day deployment, which was one of the longest sea assignments in over half of a century. They didn't know they would be out there this long. They didn't mean to. Many of them are going to say, I'm not doing that again. I don't know if it will have much impact on recruitment, but a lot of them will say, forget this. What is the temperament of the military that the president is relying on?
Well, you're correct about soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines at lower levels. A lot of them are fed up. There's no question about it. They're tired of being abused. Well, we've been through this now for almost 20 years. In fact, I would say more than 20 years. And the attitude in the senior ranks is, so what? There are more where they came from. I mean, literally, that's been my experience. These people don't like it. Don't worry about it. We can enlist other people. And when you tell them, well, you may not get the quality recruits that you need, well, we've been through that before. That doesn't matter either. So, you know, to be perfectly blunt, I think the senior officers are not going to give that much thought. They just won't. So let's turn to the senior officers, the 4 stars and 3 stars. Remember what every general wants. Every general wants another star. And the threes all want to be 4 stars. And the 4 stars all want to follow the career path that David Petraeus and Jack Keane and others have followed. What, Kurilla has done, even McKenzie, who was the architect of the disaster when we left Afghanistan, they have all bent the knee to Israel. They have all gone to the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy and said, verily, I swear allegiance, I will do as directed. So everybody's lined up because they look at what happens when the senior officers retire, who unhesitatingly, unquestioningly obey these orders and execute. They get filthy rich in retirement. And then as you go down through the ranks, all the way down to full colonels, brigadier generals, major generals, they want part of the action. They know they can't get the political favors, the financial opportunities that are given to the 3s and 4s, but they want to be part of it. So they've got their hands out and they're looking for jobs too. So if you're waiting for the senior ranks to stand up and be counted and say, we find this reprehensible, this is not morally consistent with my values, my moral conscience will not permit me to obey these orders, I think you're in for a very long wait. You're not going to hear that. You're going to be very disappointed.
Colonel, I guess we'll get you out of here on this. I'm curious about the missiles, the United States stockpiles. I keep reading reports about how depleted they've been. Could take up to 3 to 5 years to try to, get back the THAAD systems, Patriot systems, all of this that we've exhausted in just a few weeks against Iran. Are we even prepared militarily with stockpiles and munitions to go in and carry out some sort of a massive regime change operation at this stage?
No, you're not going to see a massive regime change. But what we do have the capability of doing is mass destruction of Iran's infrastructure and much of its society. And right now, that's the goal. You're trying to cause the disintegration of the government and the people that constitute the society. You're trying to ruin everyone's life in Iran. The theory is if you do this, everyone will go to the streets and say enough, and you'll get the sort of fantasy picture that President Trump spun out on his last Truth Social. Everybody says, we surrender, we give up, please take whatever you want, leave us alone. That's not going to happen. I mean, we tried that during World War II. It didn't really work. And even when people point to the atomic bomb, the truth is that the Soviet offensive in Manchuria, well underway, had a much bigger impact on the Japanese leadership because the last thing they wanted was to be occupied by the Soviets. They knew what that meant: mass rape, murder, oppression, destruction. So much better to surrender to the Americans. But unfortunately, people believe that you can bomb people into submission. No matter how many times you try and it fails, it doesn't matter. So I think that's where we are.
It's like that meme. We're going to do it anyway. There's all these reasons not to.
Well, there's a couple of things to think about, though, and this is very important. Things are going to get very rough next month.
Yeah.
You're going to see the proverbial chickens come home to roost. This oil and gas problem is going to spread. The fertilizer issue is real. Famine is going to break out before the end of the year in a number of different countries. But a lot of things are not going to be available to us here at home. And when Americans feel that kind of pain, they're going to look at the government and say, what did you do? And at that point, I think this government is going to be in a lot of trouble. And anybody who says, well, this was really the fault of the Republicans, that's nonsense. All these Democrats are on board. They're all along for the ride. And everybody has their hands out for money. Well, there's not enough money to buy off tens of millions of angry Americans who can't feed their families, who can't get to work, who can't afford their automobiles and can't afford gas. So just tuck that away and keep in mind that that's where we're headed beyond the current war.
Yeah, until they roll out some sort of universal basic income and push us further and further into debt, print more money, more fake money, and keep the machine going.
Well, we're going to talk about the borrowed time that we're on in the U.S. economy later in the show, but thank you for that warning because, it's not good. If if the economy was a human, it'd be on life support.
No, it would have been. It's like it'd be dead already.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, and trying to resuscitate it. I mean, at this point, at $40 trillion in debt. I was speaking to an investor today. He said it's beyond fixable. Like, it is unfixable at nearly $40 trillion in debt. So I don't know what the future looks like for the U.S. dollar, but it is not good. Colonel, great to see you as always. Thank you for your great insights over the national conversation, and always sobering, but to the Colonel's point, this renewed military attack is imminent. Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good to see you. All right, coming up, we are going to talk about Ebola. The news headlines are telling you that it is spreading. It's a rapid outbreak. What do we need to know? We're also, again, going to talk about the U.S. economy because the Treasury bonds don't lie. The government is having to borrow in order to finance this war. This means that it's going to just get harder for us slaves. So we're going to look at the data on that as well.
We got to take our country back. I mean, just see like this massy election, $30 million pouring in from AIPAC, like the war machine. Secretary Hegseth is down there, like $30 million being spent to try to get Massey out of there because he's trying to prevent us from going into more wars. Like, this is what we're up against right now.
Yeah.
We're going to take you down to Kentucky at the end of the show as well. At the Massey headquarters, we're going to be there. So we got all that.
Where'd you get that shirt?
Where'd I get the shirt?
Is that new?
It's a nice shirt. No, I've had it for a little while.
I didn't buy you that shirt.
Then I bought it for myself.
Who bought you? Just kidding. That's a handsome shirt. Okay. Yeah, my husband's handsome. I just got distracted for a second. I don't know what you just said about Kentucky. We're going to get back to the subject in just a minute. But first, we want to tell you about our friends at Ethos, because a lot of us don't like thinking about life insurance because it forces you to think about worst case scenarios. But if you have a family, it's not just about you. It's about making sure that your family's okay if something unexpected happens. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, and it's 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and even get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam required. You just answer a few simple health questions online, and you can get up to $3 million in coverage, with some policies starting around $30 a month. Now, what I like is that it removes all the friction, because no one needs a complicated process for something this important. So protect your family with life insurance through Ethos. Do not wait, because obviously the younger you are, the better your product will be that you're able to buy. So don't wait till tomorrow. You're this young today. Do it right now. Get up to $3 million in coverage in as little as 10 minutes at ethos.com/redacted. Application times may vary. Rates may vary. Take 10 minutes to get covered today with life insurance through Ethos. So get your free quote at ethos.com/redacted. One more time, that's ethos.com/redacted. Well, the media says there is a new World Health Organization outbreak of Ebola. So see this community note here on this headline from the BBC, global health emergency. Well, what that community note tells us is what the WHO actually says. The BBC is using scare tactics in their headlines. The WHO did not declare Ebola an international health emergency. Instead, they designated the specific outbreak in the Congo a public health emergency of international concern. So the post and the article headline are misleading. Go figure. Now, what the WHO actually says is that this is not, see what I highlighted there, not a pandemic emergency, but they did declare that this outbreak is extraordinary because it appears to be spreading undetected across multiple regions in Congo and into Uganda, with healthcare worker deaths and unclear transmission claims. Most concerning, this is a rare strain that currently has no approved vaccines, unlike the more common Ebola Zaire strains. Now, it's worth noting who is telling us this, because the last time the WHO managed a major outbreak in Congo, just a few years ago, they had this scandal because their doctors and staff entrapped women into sex slavery. Basically, they investigated this. They did not deny it. But remember that the WHO operates outside the boundaries of any world government. So they said, sorry, we did all that raping last time we were looking into the Ebola. We're going to try not to do that again. So, okay, let's just keep that in mind while they're looking into the Ebola. Also, the original COVID panickers are starting to ring in. This is Dr. Neil Stone, who claims to have been officially the first person to use the word COVID, saying It's really, really bad. And what's worse is that we don't have the global efforts or the domestic efforts to control this because of RFK Jr. But the U.S. is, in fact, currently restricting travel visa privileges to Africa. The CDC invoked Title 42, a public health law that restricts entry into the U.S. during outbreaks of communicable diseases. So what do we need to know about Ebola? Do we panic? Is there raping going on? What do we need to know, basically? So we called in Dr. Pierre Kory. He's the author of The War on Ivermectin. He was one of the few sane voices during the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's bring him in if we're being prepped for an Ebola pandemic. So let's read the tea leaves, Dr. Kory. What do you think?
I'm trying to keep a straight face here. We're doing this again, right? Last week it was hantavirus. Now it's Ebola.
Yeah.
And it's got the same fingerprints and everything, right? It's number one, right? There's a vaccine that was recently being worked on and approved for this odd strain of Ebola virus. And isn't that convenient?
It's always convenient.
It's just bizarre. You know what I call this? Fundraising by fear. They're just trying to remain relevant. They're trying to get everyone scared. They're trying to get more funds. They're trying to keep everyone in the fold because everyone has run away. They're tired of the lies, the manipulation. And so this is them like trying to make themselves relevant. And what's shocking to me, well, maybe it's not so shocking, is how poor they're executing this, right? The mixed messaging, whether it's an emergency or a pandemic or an international concern, they can't even get their definitions straight, and they make up those definitions for their convenience. And then the cases, right? When you think back to that Ebola scare, the kind of the real one that we had, was it 10 years ago, 2014, 15, you're talking about like 10, 11,000 cases. The stuff I'm reading that's coming around the media, it's like they say, I think 250 deaths, but only 8 cases confirmed. Like, please get that straight. And then also it's nothing compared to the amount of cases they had, 10 years ago. And then lastly, this happens. There's always outbreaks of Ebola down there. They're pretty good at containing them. I don't know why this one suddenly they're like, we don't know what's going on. There might be more than we think. And it's, again, fear, fear, fear. And we're tired of it. I can't believe they think this still works.
Right. Well, if they're saying it's not an emergency, but you should feel the emotion of concern. Like they're asking us to express an emotion.
That's what this is, right? It's, some people call it PSYOP, and they're manipulating us, their attention. And, Natalie, we talked last week, as I was starting to think, I was like, why is anyone paying attention? And I realized you made the point that, the media profits off of this too, right? Everyone, get a little fear out there. People start clicking, following the news, and they want to hear more about it. I think you guys are much more interested in calling it straight and getting people to not pay attention. And I'm happy to participate in that. But, this constant obsession with these potentially deadly diseases from halfway across the world that is like, they're gluing to our eyeballs through all the media channels all day. And then the social media stuff, it's like people don't have anything better to do.
Right. No, I mean, that's the point of our show, is like calling out these false flags so we don't fall for it. And also to not be fearful of Ebola or hantavirus or whatever other BS they're spinning on us. So maybe you could help us follow the money here, because I'm always curious when somebody like Dr. Neil Stone comes out and says Ebola outbreak could get bad, really bad, and we got to pay attention to this. And then you have CNN and all these other media organizations who are pushing this narrative. You've obviously been on the receiving end of their ire and going after you big time to try to silence you, because you probably were going after their money source. Have you been able to figure out like where the money flows in all of this?
Unfortunately, from where I sit, no, I don't have, I'm outside that system. I got excommunicated. All I can do is like the same thing I've always done as a physician. I watch patterns, I make deductions, and the way I see it, it's, there's just so much money. I think, the easiest sort of suspect is the pharmaceutical industry, right? They're the biggest advertiser, right? They want to drive people to their products. Vaccines are a huge moneymaker, and anything that threatens their products. And, like you just mentioned, Clayton, in COVID, I came out speaking truths, based on deep research, and I thought that information I was bringing out would be appreciated. Instead, I was like looking into the crosshairs from everywhere. And it took me a little while to realize that the things that I was speaking were threatening massive markets of pharmaceuticals. It was threatening remdesivir, Paxlovid, molnupiravir, and God forbid the vaccines. And those markets that just opened up overnight, where they made billions and billions for years until people realized that they shouldn't care and that those things were dangerous. It wasn't fun for me. But I haven't backed down. I'm going to still, like you guys, I'm going to call out nonsense and try to educate the public, because they got to hear some reason, some common sense, some rationale, and some logic from somewhere, because nothing makes sense out there.
I mean, you mentioned this new, I just want to bring up the vaccine piece of this, that they've been developing this new vaccine, as you mentioned, ahead of this announcement. It's like, they think we're stupid.
Yes.
I really... Can you talk about that?
And maybe if you could extrapolate, like, what if one of our moms goes because they see this and they're like, go to the doctor, can I have the Ebola vaccine? What would happen?
Yeah, they see it on CNN.
I think if any doctor even considered giving someone the vaccine for Ebola, first of all, there's something wrong with that doctor's clinical reasoning. Because number one, we're talking about similar to hantavirus. You're talking about a disease that is very hard to contract. This is not airborne. It's not respiratory. It's close contact. You're talking about body secretions. It also can be well quarantined and controlled. This is not a disease for a vaccine. Not like a fast mutating respiratory virus was a disease for a vaccine either. But at least they could pretend that story a little bit better. But here, I mean, the hantavirus is the best example. And by the way, when was that hantavirus epidemic? Oh, yeah, it was just last week in that news cycle, right?
Right. Yes. And it's gone now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was 8 days ago. And by the way, I'm sure I remember I talked with Natalie about the amount of stories that were skyrocketing. We hit like 350,000 in like a 7-day period. I bet you it's down to like 5 now. And now Ebola is the pandemic du jour. But what's weird about those two diseases is why they are working on vaccines for diseases that are very, very difficult to transmit human to human. Now, I don't want to play into the scaremongering, but do they know something we don't? Or is that what's going to happen? Some sort of weaponized strain where suddenly maybe it's not so hard to catch anymore. Either way, I will never listen to their guidance or direction, because on their face, we've seen this, we've seen these patterns. It's never about truth, and it's never about our welfare.
Before we get you out of here, Dr. Corey, one thing I am concerned about, which I don't think is fear-mongering, but it's these ticks and this massive surge in ticks across the United States, and all of these farmers saying they can't stop them, just inundating their farms. And now there are people who've been reporting getting these tick bites and now have developed this red meat allergy where they can't eat red meat anymore. I mean, that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but now more and more people are coming forward and talking about it. Maybe you can just address that. How would that happen?
I don't think I can really add much more beyond sharing your concern and your fear. I was watching something on that the other day, and I started to really think. And here's the thing, like that tick thing, we know of other insane little experiments that they're doing, like with the mosquitoes in Hawaii, where they're weaponizing them. They're doing research into like vaccines by mosquito, modifying mosquitoes. And so the idea that they're monkeying around with these natural experiments and that there's going to be harms to human populations as a result, that stuff is real. We just lived through COVID. That was a humanitarian catastrophe. That was the result of them doing scientific research, bioweapons research. I don't know what they're doing the tick thing for, but the idea that people are now getting sick as the result of something that they're monkeying around with that they really shouldn't be, it is concerning. And I'm like you, I can't do it. What are we going to do? Stay in my house, not go for a walk in the woods anymore because of this nonsense? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, like I'm going to get a red meat allergy because. But the good news is that I'm sure there's the Bill Gates fake meat that I'll be able to eat as a result of it. So don't worry about that. You'll be well taken care of on your fake protein.
Yeah, that really
It'll be made out of
ticks me
ticks.
off. Get it?
Yeah.
It ticks me off.
You can get the meat made out of ticks.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. We're full circle to bugs.
Crickets, all of it. Dr. Pierre Corey, great to see you as always. Thank you for alleviating any fears out there. Anybody whose grandma's scared about Ebola, send them this interview. Don't panic. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for the BS. Great to see you as always, Doc.
Great to see you guys. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
All right, coming up, we're going to talk about the U.S. economy and all the writing on the wall that continues.
The debt bomb.
It's basically, it's graffiti on the wall now. It's huge. It's flashing signs at night. So we're going to look at those flashing signs in a minute.
We're also going to take you to Kentucky. We're going to talk with Thomas Massey's team down there and a bunch of journalists. I mean, dozens upon dozens of journalists have descended on Kentucky to try to help at least move the needle in the right direction on the Massey campaign, which the big primary election is tomorrow against the Israel First APEC candidate down there. $30 million poured into that campaign. So we'll do that. But first, we want talk about the economy. Look at what's going on right now. The debt bomb is about to explode. See what's happening with U.S. Treasury bonds now, 30-year Treasuries. There's a bond crisis that seems to be unfolding right now. Just go to Zero Hedge and read about it across the world. So what is happening? Well, smart money is moving into precious metals for sure, and moving away from the U.S. dollar, moving away from the U.S. toxic debt bubble that's about to explode. And things look like they're getting worse as we head into the midterm elections for President Trump. Of course, new CPI numbers just came out today, as well as the inflation numbers. All of that pointing to trouble for the U.S. dollar and these very, very strong headwinds heading into November. But forget the elections. Who cares about politicians? You need to protect yourself. You need to protect your family. I had a friend of mine reach out recently. He said, look, I've got this amount of money sitting here. What do I do right now? You can either invest in real estate, which is a tangible asset, gold or silver, precious metals. And that's why central banks are buying up as much as they can right now. We have a silver shortage. And the demand for gold is off the charts, where countries are trying to position their currency against a gold standard like the BRICS currencies right now. So that's what our friends at Lear Capital can help you do. If you want to start investing in precious metals to protect your family, like it's great that gold has skyrocketed in value. That's great that JP Morgan has a $6,000 price target now for gold. That's great. That's great that Bank of America and others are pointing at like $150 an ounce for silver. Wonderful. Like, it's great that it could go up. To me, I invest in precious metals as I think of it like a vault, as a way to protect my family. And again, I always say this, it's great that it's going up in value. That's great. That's not why I do it. I do it so I can get money out of US dollars and into precious metals. So our friends at Lear can help you do that. And maybe you've got like an old 401k or an old IRA that's been sitting there for years. They can actually do it for you and help move it over to a self-directed IRA. And it's really, really powerful to allow you to start investing in precious metals inside of a self-directed IRA. So call them today. It's very, very simple. Just 1-800-613-3557 to get your free bonus guide right now. Just give them a call. They're an American company. No pressure at all. Just have a conversation with them on the phone. Tell them your family situation, and if it's right for you, ask them about their prices. Ask them everything. Any questions you have. Or just go to LearRedacted.com. That's the website. And you could receive up to $20,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase. Again, 1-800-613-3557 for your free guide. Protect your family right now, gold and silver.
Well, the American economy now has a new slogan: buy now, pay later. Consumers are hurting, so they kind of have to. There's now new polls showing that 51% of Americans are having to use installment plans for just regular online purchases. Now, this is not luxury items, a leather coat. These are things that people need, like an air conditioner, a heater, something to fix their home. Another 17% saying they're using this occasionally, especially among lower income households. 37% are using these installment plans compared to 21% of higher income family. Now, that's because the economy is just too hard to live. Now, the U.S. government and officials in the Trump administration, when they're asked about how hard the economy has become, especially fuel prices, gas prices, living expenses, they kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, we needed to have this pain because Iran and nuclear weapons. That's kind of how it is. Now, credit card payments are having higher installment plan. Again, credit card use, higher installment plan use. This is how desperate it's become for the working class. And why do they have to do this? Because the value of the U.S. dollar is plummeting by the day due to government action. Now, a real indicator of trouble, not the stock market, which continues to sort of bounce around based on emotion and the perversion of government messaging. But no, the Treasury yields is where we get a real indicator. Now, 30-year Treasury hit a 20-year high recently. The 10-year Treasury spiked to 15 months high. That means that the government's own debt is skyrocketing along with consumer debt. And in fact, it leads it. Now, a Treasury yield is basically what interest rate does the U.S. government have to pay to borrow money? Now, you know that we're going to war for billions of dollars. We don't have it. We're having to borrow to do it, and we're borrowing at higher and higher rates because we're not good for it. Collectively, we're not good for it. And because U.S. Treasuries are considered the risk-free benchmark, almost every other interest rate is built on top of it. So your mortgage, business loans, auto loans, credit card, corporate debt, commercial real estate financing, even developing country borrowing, developing countries who have nothing to do with this will hurt because of it. So think about how unfair that is. It's harder for consumers to borrow money because the government is over borrowing for their own priorities, not yours, clearly, and that will stagnate the economy and weaken your purchasing power. So if you make $5, you can't buy very much with that $5, even less than you could yesterday. Now, when the 10 or the 30-year Treasury yield spikes, the government is paying more interest, companies pay more interest, and consumers pay more interest, and a heavily indebted system starts straining. Well, starts is the wrong word. Strains further beyond even comprehension. Now, this is what former Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson calls the doom loop. It's a scary feedback loop where governments run massive debts. They issue more bonds to finance that debt. Investors are nervous, so they want higher yield, and deficits worsen even more. Governments issue more debt. Investors demand higher yields. I mean, how long can we do this, right? It's almost like you just keep going deeper and deeper underwater, so you just swim down. And now the government, of course, is spending that money that it has to borrow, then using taxpayer money to manage that debt, while the dollars that us taxpayers hold